Okay. I would like to welcome you all today, and special thanks to our Professor Anastasia Samaras from George Mason University. She's a Professor Emerita of Education. She is with the College of Education and Human Development at George Mason University, Virginia, in the USA. She's an internationally recognized self-study research methodologist, teacher, educator, and pedagogical scholar. A collaborator on multiple faculty professional development projects. Anastasia seeks to make self-study research accessible to professionals across disciplines, which has entailed her co-facilitation of 5 faculty professional groups, including a virtual adjusted faculty learning community sponsored through the Stearns Center for Teaching and Learning at George Mason. We would like to welcome her and thank her for giving this seminar to us. She will speak on innovative pedagogical inquiries using self-study research to inform practice. And Anastasia, we are delighted to have you here.
It's my pleasure, Katerina, and I thank you especially for all of our communication and coordination on this. So hello everyone, and thank you for coming to learn a little bit about the work that I've been doing for quite some time now. And I have listed some of the items that I will go over. I try to make it both sophisticated and practical for you. I know you have busy lives and have other things that you want to do, and my goal is to make it both informative, but also something that you will hopefully leave today and think about in some small way that you might consider conducting your own self-study research. So you'll see from the agenda, celebrating our partnership, introducing the self-study research method, thinking about your own inquiries, working with colleagues, how do you enact a self-study learning communities, which I think will be very informative to the work of the center, and a very rich supply of self-study resources. So first I want to say, wow, I am so grateful. Sometimes I think, how lucky can I be that I was able to be a delegate to the Pharos Summit that was made possible, of course, with the International Partnership Program, but especially with the Greek Ministry of Education and Religious Affairs and Fulbright, Greece. And I joined there with Anastasia Katsantis from George Mason University, and also your Yannis Karas here today as a delegate. And I went to universities in Thessaloniki and in Athens, and like you, just rejoiced in the ability to think about how can Greek and US universities work together in higher education and in their partnerships to make learning more vibrant, and the work that we do for students and for ourselves more productive. So I really do celebrate that. And more than anything, that was always my goal. And that was, as I was trying to retire, they pulled me in and said, no, you're going to Greece. And I said, oh, no, somebody else, I've been. And they said, no, we're going. And Anastasia Katsantis said, yeah, Prepis Tatoganis. I said, okay, Tatogano. And so here I am. And this is where it came. So I just want to step back. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves that we really have so much that we can do. And we have so much capacity that I think we forget or take for granted. And one of those capacities is to learn about what we do in our teaching or whatever practice you're doing. If you're a coordinator, if you're a dean, if you are a president, if you are an occupational therapist, a librarian, an engineer, whatever practice, we do have the capacity to keep learning, right? And that's what I think your center and our Center for Teaching and Learning is all about. But we also have the capacity to help each other and to support each other as learners. And that's something that we don't tend to do in higher education enough. So we know from the research what expert teachers do. We know they are open to continuous learning, that they study their teaching, and that they dialogue with colleagues in what we call a reciprocal mentorship. So nobody's in charge. We are here in all of this together today as a collective, as a group of faculty from 2 different universities, seeing what and how we might understand our teaching or our practice better. And I'd like to think that we really do have a sense of self-accountability. That I know when I was at Catholic University, I was there for 10 years before Mason as director of teacher ed. And I was in charge of these accreditation visits, and they were always like, okay, let's look good. Let's not tell them anything that doesn't look good, right? We want to pass. And let's let them come in and evaluate us in a way that we're going to shine. And I stepped back and I thought, well, I'm asking my students about, their portfolios, their work, but we haven't asked ourselves as faculty and as a program or as a college, how can we get better at what we're doing? And that really started my launch of the self-study of professional practice, because the only thing we really can change is ourselves. And we should do that first in the first person before somebody else tries to do that for us. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. All right. But then the topic today is pedagogical innovation, right? It's more than just thinking about teaching of how do I make a lesson plan? How do I use the internet? This is beyond. And I had the wonderful opportunity to work with Lynn Scott Constantine and Leslie Smith. Lynn was faculty in the School of Art, and Leslie was digital literacy and innovation largely. And from them, in one of the faculty self-study groups that we coordinated and facilitated, they shared that there are certain dispositions of people who are pedagogically innovative. So let's just think about this and think about, is this us? Are we willing to explore, embrace mistakes, cultivate, collaborate, experiment, learn, and share? It takes courage. It takes courage to say, well, I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job, but I want to do a better job. Or to say, I'm not really good at something, right? We don't really want to show anybody that we have any weakness. So we're less likely to want to highlight anything that's not working. And then I say in response, yes, you're so confident that you want to keep getting better because you know that that's what you can do. And I remember going to my file cabinet, maybe you've had this feeling sometime, where you pull out the lesson plan or your notes that you're going to use, and you think, gosh, I've just done this, I want to change it up in some which way. And what has that been like for you? What do you want to change? What do you want to improve upon? And of course, now we don't use the file cabinet. We have the files on the computer. So let me give you a little bit of background. I hope this is useful for you about the self-study research. It started with faculty as teacher educators. And actually, there's a very large special interest group of the American Educational Research Association, which is about 300 members, that started with self-study teacher educators, largely in science, from Australia, Canada, and the United States. And that continued to grow and now goes beyond just teacher educators, goes to any professional. And what they said was, we are largely qualitative, although there's lots of quantitative data related, for systematically examining your work or your role, what I can do differently in any chosen field in any discipline, but it's always for improvement, not just on a personal, professional level, but for somebody beyond yourself. And it does, although the name doesn't suggest it, actually require critical collaborative inquiry. This was Laurie Harmon, who was a faculty in the School of Recreation, Tourism, and Management, and she was working with Mark Gleason at Michigan Technological University, and she was in one of the first faculty self-study community groups that I worked with. And you can see that she's asking a question about her use of hybrid learning techniques, but she's asking how it impacts community building for her students. So that's just one example of how it's beyond you. And not to give you too much information today, because you certainly can read so much about it, and I'm happy to share whatever resources I have. I've sent some to Katerina that are linked here. But the self-study is actually its own paradigm, its own methodology. Although some of the early scholars were action researchers, they decided that there wasn't the question of what they could do within the action research paradigm. And some of them, like myself, came out of the research reflective practitioner inquiry. Again, although we have reflection, it's not only reflection. So the methodology has multiple methods, and those continue to grow. Virtual bricolage, which I've been doing a lot of with Kathleen Pithouse Morgan, who was at University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, now at University of Nottingham. We communicated across continents, across time zones, across disciplines, and we exchanged and conducted a lot of research virtually. And we used any method that helped us answer the question that we were asking. So we were bricoleurs. I conducted back in 2004 a personal history where I actually looked at where my thinking about my teaching and my values generated from, where my understanding of theoretical work, such as the Vygotskian perspective that I was drawn to and then made it more neo-Vygotskian, and how I take that into my work. Collective self-study means that you're working with a group of people who are studying what they are doing as a program or as a group of faculty. Art space can involve so many different forms: photography, dance, choral reading, poetry, and so forth. Memory work, where you pull back on artifacts that help you recall and understand what you're currently doing. And then the newest one, thanks to Yanis and our other colleagues at George Mason, Courtney Baker and Laura Vito, on last week, we presented, as you may know, a webinar for doctoral students in both of our programs on intercultural self-study, which is communicating across cultural boundaries as critical friends across countries, organizations, universities, and various groups. And there are many other self-study methods. This is just a handful, not to overwhelm you. But the goal that Yanis and I and our colleagues had was that what better way to help our doctoral students to network and understand both the similarities and differences of the doctoral dissertation journey than to connect them as what we call critical friends, which I'll cover in a minute. And what a good way, beyond just faculty communicating in these partnerships, but to involve our students. So I'm really, really excited that you're here, because then you can work to support some of the work that now they may be dabbling in self-study. So you might be saying, well, maybe it's not for me. I'm not a teacher, educator. No, that's not an issue. It's for any practitioner in any practice, discipline, university, or country. It is for personal, professional, or program renewal. A lot of these things I've already mentioned to you can also be, for instance, there are several books in self-study that are devoted completely to social justice in education, and educators who are studying their issues of equity and gender, and that's their foci. We reform in the first person, and of course, ultimately, as researchers and faculty, right, academics, we advance our field. So, multiple methods, and particularly interesting today, methodologically innovative. So let me just pause there so you can think about it. It's self-study, is studying your role or your work in your professional practice. It can be teaching or any other profession. It's for anyone. It is not based in one particular theory. I'm a Vygotskian. I can use that in my self-study. It is for you and others, and it involves many ways that you can go about it. And as a beginner, you can just do it in general. One of my most memorable professional experiences was to be a member of the Greek Teacher Professional Development Project, which was funded through the Fulbright Greeks and our State Department, U.S. State Department, and George Mason. And along with Anastasia Katsantis and many others, so you see I've had this goal for many years to work with you. And we brought humanities teachers from all over Greece, and they came to George Mason for a 6-week professional development experience. And part of that was teaching them how to conduct self-study, along with many other professional experiences. And it was amazing to work with them. They returned to their schools all over Greece, and they worked to implement the innovations that they had learned. One of the things we did learn, however, as a group of faculty was, because there was only funding for one, or only the way that it was designed for one teacher from each school, when they returned, it was difficult because they didn't have the support of a colleague or maybe the administration to implement the ideas that they had. But even more interestingly, instead, they bonded with each other. And to this day, they are very close with each other. They've baptized each other's children. They go on vacations together, some of them. And when I came in November, I was able to meet with several of them. They are like family to me. So as I said, the self-study research is not limited certainly to the United States or Greece or anywhere else. It is transnational, transdisciplinary, and transcontinental. And in 2012 and 2014, I was invited to go to Durban in South Africa, and had an amazing experience which brought together 3 universities. One of them was largely all African-American and had been an African-only university, and the others were mixed. And so they said, we need to come together post-apartheid. We need to learn from each other. We need to support each other. We need to have professional development. And they received a large grant, and they created a transformational educational studies project. And they went on and have continued to do self-studies of their practice, and then have supervised so many doctoral students. Unbelievable, because they started to see themselves in each other's work, particularly the context of all the healing that they needed to do. So that was, again, a highlight. I was also able to work in South Korea. We had visitors who came to George Mason, were anxious to learn about self-study, translate my book, so forth, so on. And I went there, and what they did was a group of faculty studied their own work as supervisors, right? As faculty teaching teachers. And then they taught the teachers how to do self-study. And they went out to the schools up and down South Korea to see how the change was happening in the schools. So lots of exciting things going on. But let's go back to you now. What do you want to study? What is it that, and how you might author your own question? So let's switch to thinking about what everyone else has done now to what and how you might go about this practice. So this was actually a question that was asked by faculty from University of Management and Technology, I think, from Pakistan, because we had 2 universities from Pakistan, and they were largely, and they are engineers. And they wanted to, and remember that unfortunately, faculty outside of teacher ed usually have no class in pedagogy, right? So they're anxious to learn about, how do I make these large classes better? How do I connect? And this was the question one of the faculty asked. How I want to help my students to synthesize and make connections and applications of what they are learning to my classroom, to the real world, not just theoretical, right? How can this be connected for them? So I'm going to ask you to jot down on a little piece of paper, computer, phone, or whatever, to take a minute and to think about, what do you most urgently want to improve or understand in your professional practice, your teaching, or whatever you are currently doing, whether it's administration or teaching. And we call this a perpetual prompt, where we start to write, I want to learn about, I'm curious to learn, and we keep writing. And then we look back and start to see, what do I keep saying over and over again? Highlight that. When I conduct this with faculty and students, I ask them to exchange and to look at each other's continuous writing. And then to find the heart. What seems to be the one thing that keeps coming up for you, that would be something you choose, that's something in your own context that matters to you and to others? What would that look like for you? One of the motivators of conducting a self-study is that it really gives you a chance to think about what you already do anyway. Teaching a current course, teaching a new course, perhaps presenting at a conference, or creating a publication. So it really has a nice carrot to it, particularly for faculty. And those questions, of course, get shifted a little bit here and there. But if you're really honest with yourself and step back, you'll think, when I go home or when I talk to colleagues, I keep saying, and I just wish I could do what? What is it that for you is really so very important that you haven't really had a chance to step back and have a way to think about? I hope you've jotted some things down, and that you might try that perpetual prompt after the webinar when you get some time. When I work with faculty, I like to use different ways of encouraging them and students to think about their question. And one thing that I did during COVID was I did a lot of walking. You might have done that too, because you had to be outside and largely alone. We have a beautiful park near us, Quiet Waters Park. And I had used to take photography. I pulled out my camera, and I started taking pictures of all the different trees in the park. And then I presented the pictures to faculty and asked them to choose one that represented or was symbolic of their professional journey to date, or of the topic that they wanted to understand. And this one was one that I chose because you'll see it's a young tree, and mentorship has been central to my work for many years. I believe in it. I was mentored myself and very grateful for that. But this young tree has a chance of getting bigger and growing stronger, but it'll need light, it'll need water, it'll need care, and good roots. So sometimes I use this artifact or object as a way to encourage others to think about their work. I've also used haiku poetry, knot symbolism, and lots of other fun ways. I have a good time with it, actually. Okay, let's see. So what do you bring to the inquiry? So you already know a lot about this topic, right? You have a knowledge base about what you're wanting to understand, but what do you need to know more about? So you might go in and look at the literature, see what's happening, what others have written about your topic. You do not have to publish a self-study. It's what we do every day when we teach anyway. We just don't name it. But it does have the opportunity for you to do that if you choose to. You'll want to pick something that has a boundary that's manageable, not too big, something focused. And again, think about who will benefit from it besides you. So let's talk about this critical friend, which makes no sense. How can you be critical and be a friend, right? I think the self-study group always just tries to find the most difficult words so that we can keep thinking about how to explain them better. So critical friends are trusted colleagues who seek support as validation. So if you think about check coding in qualitative research or validation in quantitative, it is a way for you to check your own thinking about the project you're doing and also to gain new perspectives on the interpretations that you're making. And you're doing that while others are also conducting their self-study, hopefully, not necessarily, but could be. And then it has this reciprocal mentorship, no hegemony. And that really, that balance, it's so equitable that it sometimes encourages you to be more open and more trustful of things you wouldn't normally say. And of course, you know, a trusted colleague, I think you know who those are for you, right? And you can have one or you can have a group. When I work with others, I like to have at least 3. And then sometimes we'll do a triad of exchanging what we're working on. So my work really comes on the foundation and the shoulders of many other self-study scholars. I am not the only person that is an expert in self-study. And it is the community that has really nourished me. And I'm forever grateful for that. And one of the books I wrote, I decided that we needed, however, to make the methodology more practical, more understandable. And we had talked about characteristics of self-study, but we really didn't have any kind of a design of going about actually doing it. Not that it's a step-by-step procedure, but how do you go about it? So I talked about first choosing something that is yours and your question situated in your context. And that elaboration of your context is very important for others to understand what you're trying to figure out. You work with others. I talked about number 2, critical collaborative inquiry. We talked about number 3. It's always for improved learning beyond yourself. Number 4, in that people say, well, how can it be research if it's subjective because you're studying yourself? And the answer is that really largely, as we know, most research is not completely subjective, but more importantly, when you work with a critical friend team for your validation, and when you open your work up for publication and presentation, but most importantly, when you outline very systematically and transparently everything you've done, how you did it, and it's not only data about you, can also be data from your students, from your colleagues, and so on and so forth. So those are the 5 foci that I hope you find useful. And then if you want to think about design, again, you can see these 7 design elements, starting with your question, establishing a critical friend team. Most importantly, I want you to step back with that question I ask you to think about now and put it in and try to describe in your own mind, why and where does that come from? What's going on in the environment that has prompted you to ask that particular question? This context, what is it? Is it the context of a classroom? Is it the context of working with as a supervisor for your doctoral students? What and how did the context impact your decision and choice of that question? And we know the rest. You are researchers, right? You are faculty. You know how to articulate a rationale, a proposal, frame your question in ongoing literature. You know all of this. These are things we do when we do any research. If you choose a particular method, of course, you would align it with the self-study method. And then you plan purposeful inquiries and pedagogies, and you say, haha, I am going to try this. I am going to try something different because I am the one that can change up that my students are falling asleep in my class. And this is what I'm going to try to do. And you keep a log of that, a researcher log of what's happening and how that changed up things or didn't, and in what ways it did. And you share those out with your students and say, hey, I'm working on this. I want to get better at this. Send me anonymous feedback after the class is over and after I have graded and submitted your grades. And then if you want to, you can submit it to an IRB. And usually my institutional review board will say, since it's only you as the instrument, it is exempt, but I always get permission to collect the data from my students after the class is over and after I've given them their grades. So you see, it's not digging up new stuff and going and conducting this huge major research, although it can be very huge. It can be very simple. And I thought to share one of my colleagues who's been one of my mentors, very supportive, Professor Hilmarson, who's now actually one of the directors at the National Science Foundation, was a professor and working with a program we have at George Mason who prepares mathematics leaders, specialists who go into the schools and work with our elementary teachers largely to help them in teaching math. So these are specialists. And this was the first self-study she ever conducted in self-study in 2017. This is linked, but again, Katarina has the article. And you'll see her question. So Margaret asked, I conducted a self-study about my teaching decision-making as a role as an instructor for an online synchronous course for math specialists. Now remember, everything was, they had an online program. Mason has had online programs very early on pre-COVID, which actually helped us out a lot during COVID. But, you know, for some of the teachers, we were just moving into the online teaching environment. And look at the simple data that she was able to collect. Journal reflections throughout the semester for every section she taught, anonymous surveys, mid and end, and research memos. And then her results were student autonomy and engagement was essential, authenticity and practicality, and fostering community. So she didn't have to publish it, but she did in the Journal of Math Teacher Education. And you'll see here, I was both exploring new ways to design the course and also adapting pedagogy from my previous teaching experiences to face-to-face courses. Anybody who's switched from face-to-face to online, we know it's not like you just take that course you're teaching in person and plop it into the online thing. It doesn't work, right? We learned that the hard way. So she had to figure out how to do that. And she also did a lot of things that we do as researchers. We question our assumptions because we have lots of assumptions, right? We're faculty, we teachers. So I needed to examine beliefs and assumptions about my teaching as a mathematics educator and how they would be manifested now in the online teaching environment. So what I'm trying to do here is give you examples so that you see its practicality and how easy it can be, but also how useful, I hope, your question, working with colleagues and thinking about a manageable small inquiry to start with, what kinds of data you already have or could easily collect, and how those results might be useful to others. Then to take you to a whole new level, remember, I've been doing this for a long time. This is the exciting part for me, is that the idea that you can be so creative in thinking about how you go about your pedagogies. I am not trained in art or dancing or poetry, but I do all of those in my teaching and in my research. And this orange link is with an article or chapter in a book, an edited book on being a rich, risky researcher. Now, I didn't grow up that way. I grew up very traditional, very conservative in my thinking and following the rules and so forth and so on. And I think as I've gotten older, I've reclaimed the artistic core of myself that has really just made my professional work so much more vibrant for myself and for others. And these are several pieces that Kathleen and I and other colleagues did together. And you can see we first started with mood boards, which is a wonderful platform of, this was back in 2014, where you would get this virtual mood board of throwing up your ideas. And Kathleen worked with self-study scholars who were in jewelry design and clothing and so forth at her university. She says, well, these artists use these mood boards and they throw up their ideas and say, okay, how about this color? How about this object? You know, let's do that with our ideas about research. And then, of course, we had, you know, the virtual exchange. So much fun. So anyway, I won't get too carried away because we'll run out of time, but those are just some examples. Seth Husson, who was a doctoral student, computer game designer, I show you these to show you, again, that it crosses disciplines. He's now faculty at Mason in game design. And he was very nervous about moving from traditional to face-to-face, and he loved teaching face-to-face. And so he looked at his computer and all his sticky notes, and he thought about what and how he might go about his self-study. He decided, interestingly, to collect the noise in his classroom, the noise, to see what kinds of activity was going on in his face-to-face, looked at sound waves. It's just fascinating. So there's no limit to the data that you can collect. I hope you're still with me there, and I hope you're slowly absorbing a very complicated topic that I'm hoping is made a little bit easier to understand. This last section is on self-study learning communities, and that's the work that I did in 2010 to 12, and then another grant. Anyway, we had a lot of different faculty self-study groups supported through our Center for Teaching and Learning, Stern Center now. And I was, back in 2005, being interested in self-study and knowing a little bit about it then, I first held a little doctoral seminar that had no course number, ran it almost like a pilot. And then I decided to keep offering that every other year to doctoral students. And increasingly, I started to see the community effort in doing that with students. And then in 2010, I said, why don't I offer it to faculty? So with the support of the Center for Teaching and Learning, I launched faculty self-study learning communities at George Mason. And this first one, again, highlight, I've been so blessed with so many wonderful people to work with. In 2010, we had 12 faculty from 12 specializations and 4 different colleges across the whole university come together in person, but also in discussion boards, in Blackboard then, to work together on studying their teaching. And this is also linked, and you'll see a publication that we made from our collective self-study, but you'll also see individual self-studies that are in the resource folder under faculty case studies. For example, Ryan Swanson was a faculty in art history course, and he wondered whether it mattered if he had students buy his book or the textbook, which is hundreds of dollars, as you know, the actual textbook, or was it just as useful to them to buy it as an ebook? And suddenly he said, it's not about the book. It's not about which format. It's about how I teach using each format. Fascinating. So anyway, okay, that was one. Kurt Bourne, he almost walked away from the whole group. He said, no, Anastasia, I can't do this. He came into my office. We sat down. I don't understand it. I'm an engineer. I'm big data. I don't get, this is qualitative. I said, Kurt, it's okay. Just stick with it. It'll be okay. And I said, think about it. It's a hypothesis. think about deliverables. I had to change the language, right? That I get it. I'm the case. I get it, you know. And he studied how to integrate, how to reduce his dependency, because he worked, you know, with students in these big lecture halls, as most of our engineering faculty do. And he said, I just got to make this better. I feel like, you know, I'm just the sage on the stage. So Kurt Bourne called himself Captain Kirk. He was fun to work with. And then the next group was focused on e-learning, because in 2012-13, we were really moving a lot to e-learning. And we did and do have a program, an Office of Online Education. And you'll see that this little group, and when I say sponsored, I'm not talking about any big grant or programs. Basically, they said, we'll give you some funds, partial funds, to go and present this research. That was kind of, you know, so they weren't in it for the money, believe me, neither was I. But it was supported through our university, which is essential for these things to fly. And this group of scholars, which is on the next slide, in this group, I asked Leslie Ryan was the art historian, and Esperanza, who's the chair of the modern languages, to be co-facilitators. So I didn't want to be the only one who knew it. And so and for sustainability, I pulled other previous participants from earlier faculty groups as co-facilitators. And Esperanza actually created this diagram to show you what and how we went about it. So we only met once a month on campus. We had a nice meeting room. There was a wiki, and then the critical friend groups met outside for coffee in their own meetings. Yes, people produced articles, presentations, and so forth if they wanted to. They didn't have to. And again, it was faculty. And you'll see some of those in the faculty cases from all over the university, particularly IT faculty, interestingly enough. Esperanza then went on to share self-study in modern language program. And she worked with an adjunct faculty, because they were both teaching the same course online, and they wanted to see how their effectiveness in the technologies were influencing student engagement. And she was actually the one I learned the term reciprocal mentorship from, because she didn't care that she was a professor or a chair or what big shot she was. She was willing to learn along with a doctoral student, I believe, that was working as an adjunct faculty. And they co-published a chapter in one of the books that we did together. So you see that there's a beauty in letting down and being humble, and not feeling like you're too old to learn or that you know it all. This group, again linked, was actually led, this publication was led by Leslie Smith, who I mentioned earlier. And Leslie and Lynn Constantine, both artists in their own worlds, said, Anastasia, why don't we offer a faculty self-study to teach about visually rich digital learning? And do you know how much there is out there on using digital and visual methodologies in your teaching? Unbelievable. Never knew it until I learned from them. And Sean was one of those faculty. He's in hospitality, tourism, and event management. And what he did was he used this visual of a cargo ship to try to show his students in convention program planning how not to overbook or overbalance different sessions and what have you. And he used many other techniques, which you'll see in the cases later. But that's just an example. And then one of the latter groups was, we had a big grant from the NSF, National Science Foundation, called the Simple Grant. And Jill Nelson invited me to be a co-PI, and she said, Anastasia, we want you to pull out a group of interested faculty who want to publish, but they want to learn about their interactive teaching. So I worked with a group of STEM faculty, biologists and chemists and engineers and what have you, with the focus on interactive teaching only. That's what they wanted to improve. And we published that as well. This is from Jill Nelson, who's now a dean in the engineering. I love this. Theory of change. If STEM faculty are supported in designing changes in their teaching to engage students, and STEM faculty participate in a supportive community with critical friends, then over time, just like the small drop, over time, faculty will continue to make incremental and ongoing changes and engage in scholarly self-study of their teaching. So she wanted them to improve their teaching and publish it, which they have. Vasiliki Economido was one of those faculty. She is bioengineering and electrical and computer engineering faculty at George Mason. And I worked with her in the self-study component of her work because she was interested in developing interventions that allowed engineering students to implement differentiated learning. So what was happening was we had, how much we need a faculty in the STEMs, right? And people committed to teaching in that. And what was going on and working in the field of engineering, boy, do we need that, right? And so what she was doing was those students were coming in that first level engineering class, and the ones who were highly motivated sometimes just needed the support to get through it, because if you don't get through that first course, of course, they weed you out. She said, how can I support those who have the potential but need that extra support? And she crafted her pedagogy, recrafted it with these tiered homework assignments that if you can do this, then you go to this level and so forth and so on. And she can certainly share that research with you. But bravo Vasiliki, beautiful study examining choice in self-directed homework assignments in engineering course. And last, these are all linked. And again, Katerina has them all in the Dropbox folder. This is our second international handbook of self-study by Springer. Many, many chapters give you quite an array of examples if you're interested. This is the special interest group I mentioned. Every other year in East Sussex, England, we have a biennial conference at a castle called Hutsmansu Castle. And all of those proceedings and now chapters are in this link from 1996 to 2023. As you'll see, as the years go on, the higher quality and the way we became more thoughtful in our research as a self-study community. And you can find that here. This is our flagship journal, Studying Teaching Education, but more and more, easily enough, all journals, as you saw with the Journal of Math, they very much, and the higher ed journals certainly, they are anxious for self-study articles because they're not flooded with tons of them initially. And it's something that they feel is innovative, groundbreaking, and useful for their readers. And so I do encourage you to look through those resources when you can. This is a PowerPoint of faculty cases and student ones who I've worked with. These are the dissertations from Durban and worth looking at. And then self-study dissertations, it doesn't have to be a full-scale self-study dissertation. It could be that the student embeds a self-study within their existing dissertation. And I've given you two examples of that. One at the University of Hawaii, where she conducted her own dissertation with her students as participants, and then did a small pull-out piece of her own learning within that process. And example two, Arvinder Jory did a beautiful dissertation of looking at her work as a teacher in an alternative school, promoting multicultural personas for her students, and then doing a self-study of how she changed her practice, her pedagogies. And then she offers a double voice poem of her students and their voices and hers simultaneously, just so beautifully done. So those are, I hope, useful to you resources, and I will close with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia. You all inspired us, I think, with your presentation. I'm just looking to see how can I use poetry to teach programming. I find it a little difficult, but it came in a phase of my life that I was thinking that I want to take my student out of the classroom, because to see in the environment how they can use the environment for programming. So it came just on time, your presentation, I think. Okay, before I ask something, is there any questions from someone on the audience? Okay, I will ask then. I'm a little curious of how you can use it. For example, you said that it was your colleague that taught the science that found it difficult to use this methodology to self-improve. But is there some steps that you, one of these papers that you already mentioned, I'm sure that they give a more the methodology of how we do it. Mm-hmm. What would you propose us to read first?
Oh, wow. Well, I think Margaret Hilmarson's work is a good little article to start with, because she explains the self-study, but she also shows how manageable it can be and how she went through the process of choosing her question, thinking about the context, working with critical friends and so on. But that was the problem, was that we were all speaking to each other as academics that in the past, and that we weren't making this available to people that were brand new to it. And we would just say, just try it, come to the conference. Well, and, if we were lucky, we were asked to be a part of something with a previous self-study scholar. But that was one of the things that I really sought to do. And creating those particular foci and those design principles, what I would say in how to start or how to read is perhaps to look at some of the examples in the handbook, which are very sophisticated. But if you look at the abstracts, you'll start to get an idea of what did they ask, what kind of data did they collect, and what was the process.
How they used it.
How they went about it. So that is often a good way to do it. And then also to have another person who's kind of struggling with you, that you're sharing resources with each other. There's tons and tons of resources. I mean, if you just go to your library search and do self-study of teaching with
I would search for self-studying in programming.
There you
I'm
go.
sure someone will have done this before.
There you go. Or close enough.
Thank you.
And don't look for an exact example, because it doesn't have to be in your discipline to understand the design, right? We know this. Yeah.
Okay. I will ask for Professor Koulougliotis. Is the dean in our School of Environment? So, Professor Koulougliotis.
Hello, I was very happy to listen to your talk. It has been really a very interesting subject. Congratulations on your research. And I have, because I have been doing some educational research myself, even though I'm a physicist plus chemist, but I have been doing some educational research during the last few years. Do you have some evidence on how the teachers who have done self-study, on whether the teachers who have done self-study have better evaluations from the students in the end of their teaching, or whether this self-study, the way it has changed them, whether it has also changed the motivation of the students to engage in studying and stuff like that.
Sure, good question. Well, one of the things that we do is always ask for feedback, anonymous feedback from our students to see if and how and in what ways whatever we were trying out has made a difference. Mm-hmm. And yes, the results from not all, because that's how research is, right? The researcher makes the difference, have really shown that indeed it has changed, particularly faculty who have, and you'll read some of those articles that are, or chapters that I shared with Katerina, but faculty feel a transformation. And I think what it is not so much a thing they can particularly identify. It's something that they know has changed within themselves as being more interested in improving and being more creative in their approach, and being satisfied with knowing that they can be an agent of their own change. In terms of the teaching, I did work largely with both teachers who were practicing to be teachers and teachers who are currently teachers. And I'm happy to share some of that work as well. One of the ones that stand out for me, Dionysus, I love your name, by the way, is beautiful name, is Libby Roberts. Libby is an English teacher, secondary in the high school, and she teaches writing. And every year the students are given an assignment where they have to pick one of the topics that she came up with. And she had one student who had just had a baby in high school and was struggling, and she didn't want to participate. And she said to her, choose your own topic. And that student chose how to be a better mother and took off like crazy, writing and researching and whatever. And so Libby realized that giving students a choice in what they wanted to write was key to changing her practice. And yes, the improvement was that her student was now engaged. So lots of good examples, but as a large collective, I think the two handbooks are testimony to the impact, because you're right, we're impact-based. Everybody wants to see impact factors, right? I get that. And I think you start small and see those differences for yourself. And then once you cross the threshold, you'll never go back.
And one other question, thanks a lot for your feedback. Have you met any teachers, colleague and faculty who have been very reluctant at the beginning in doing self-study, and by at the end of it they felt this has been a really good experience, or the opposite, like that they felt that self-study perhaps didn't give back to them what they expected at the beginning?
Sure. You know what? I'm not saying it's the only way to study or to improve, and I only invite faculty who want to be there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's very key. There's no force. All of the participants, I mean, hundreds that I work, only come if they want to be there. And that's the motivation. And then if they come in and they say, you know what, I really want to do this, I have too many time constraints, no problem. Come back to it another time, or don't do it at all. And I think, again, this idea, it's kind of like they say in Greece, the more you pull the donkey, the more he resists, right? They say that, yeah. And that's the same with faculty. So I do think that, an audience of people who are there because they have something that is for them, right, makes a difference. That's been my experience. I don't know, others may have different ways of going about it. Mm-hmm.
Thanks a lot, and I will be looking forward to reading more on this literature, because it's a new field for me. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
For me too. That's why I asked. I really wanted to get involved. I'm sorry that we don't have you in our university to teach us to be part of your group. I would like to be a part of these groups that you described. Okay. Many thanks to Anastasia. It was really inspiring, Anastasia. I will now move to Greek. I will speak Greek now because I will go to the second part, which has to do with the center and what has done until now. Okay?
Okay, I won't understand all of it, but I will try. Okay.
I just want to be clear. Okay, thank you. Ωραία, θα περάσω τώρα στα ελληνικά λοιπόν, που νιώθω και πιο άνετα. Θα ήθελα, είμαστε εδώ με τον Σπύρο το Δουκάκη, που είναι ο επίκουρος καθηγητής στο Τμήμα Πληροφορικής και ο πρόεδρος του Ινστιτούτου Εκπαιδευτικής Πολιτικής. Η δουλειά αυτή που κάνουμε από πέρυσι στο Κέντρο Υποστήριξης Διδασκαλίας και Μάθησης έχει ολοκληρωθεί, έχει προχωρήσει αρκετά, όχι έχει ολοκληρωθεί, τώρα αρχίζει, έχει προχωρήσει αρκετά το τελευταίο διάστημα. Προτού προχωρήσω στο δικό μας, θα ήθελα να βάλω ένα βίντεο από την συντονίστρια των ΚΕΔΙΜΑ, την κυρία Ζωή Γαβριλίδου, η οποία δείχνει έτσι ποια είναι, κάνει μια απολογιστική πορεία όλων του προγράμματος των ΚΕΔΙΜΑ σε όλη την Ελλάδα και στη συνέχεια θα περάσουμε στα δικά μας. Ένα λεπτό, πρέπει να κάνω share screen και...
Ευχαριστώ πολύ για την πρόσκληση να είμαι σήμερα μαζί σας, έστω διαδικτυακά. Θα ήθελα πάρα πολύ να είμαι διαζώσεις εκεί. Σήμερα θα προσπαθήσω να σας παρουσιάσω τις δράσεις του Δικτύου των Κέντρων Υποστήριξης Διδασκαλίας και Μάθησης των Ελληνικών ΑΕΗ και θα προσπαθήσω να κάνω τον απολογισμό αυτού του έργου. Θα ξεκινήσω λέγοντας ότι στην παρουσίαση αυτή θα προσπαθήσω να δείξω το πώς γεννήθηκε το έργο, μέσα σε ποιες συνθήκες, να αιτιολογήσω το γιατί έχουμε ένα δίκτυο και επίσης το τι πετύχαμε ως τώρα. Και ξεκινώντας με ακριβώς αυτό την έναρξη του δικτύου, μια φορά λοιπόν και έναν καιρό ήταν ένα δίκτυο. Το δίκτυο αυτό γεννήθηκε στην πράξη με την αριθμό 39.88 απόφαση ένταξης στο επιχειρησιακό πρόγραμμα Ανάπτυξη Ανθρώπινου Δυναμικού Εκπαίδευση και Διαβίου Μάθηση. Είχε όμως ξεκινήσει πολύ πιο μπροστά ήδη από τον Δεκέμβριο του 2021, όταν κάναμε πολύ εκτενείς συναντήσεις και στο πλαίσιο της Συνόδου Πριτάνεων, αλλά και με Zoom, με άτομα που εμπλεκόνται σε αυτό το εγχείρημα, για να προσπαθήσουμε να δούμε πώς θα στήσουμε αυτό το πρόγραμμα. Η στόχη του δικτύου είναι ακριβώς πρώτα-πρώτα να συγκροτηθεί, το έργο αυτό είναι να συγκροτηθεί ένα δίκτυο, το δίκτυο ΚΕΔΙΜΑ, τις μεθοδολογίες για την ίδρυση και τη λειτουργία. Άρα, λοιπόν, σε εκείνη τη φάση τα πιο όρημα ΚΕΔΙΜΑ προσπαθούσαν να βοηθήσουν τα λιγότερο όρημα να χτίσουν αυτά τα κέντρα. Και επίσης, στόχος είναι η διάθεση καλών πρακτικών στη διδασκαλία και τη μάθηση και η δημιουργία αποφετηρίου, εκπαιδευτικού υλικού, διενέργεια υλικών και όλα αυτά τα ζητήματα. Το ερώτημα λοιπόν που προτιμόμαστε τώρα να απαντήσουμε είναι γιατί ένα δίκτυο, γιατί είναι σημαντικό να φτιάξουμε ένα δίκτυο των κέντρων υποστήριξης διδασκαλίας και μάθησης. Πρώτα-πρώτα, η απάντηση είναι νομίζω εξίσου εύκολη, γιατί έτσι είναι ευκολότερη η διάθεση καλών πρακτικών όταν υπάρχει αυτό το δίκτυο που παίρνει τις καλές πρακτικές από το ένα ΚΕΔΙΜΑ, τις διαδίδει, μεταδίδει σε άλλες, προσθέτει κάτι άλλο και άρα όλο αυτό έρχεται να δράσει προσθετικά. Παράλληλα, επιτρέπει τον από κοινού πειραματισμό σε καινοτόμες μεθόδους. Είναι ένα πολύ ωραίο εργαστήριο, ας πούμε, καινοτομίας. Η συλλογική φωνή στο πλαίσιο διεκδικήσεων, όπως και τώρα που προσπαθούμε να δούμε τι θα συνέχεια των έργων αυτών. Φυσικά έτσι οικονομεί πόρους και δυνάμεις στη δημιουργία υλικού. Δεν χρειάζεται να κάνουμε όλοι τα πάντα, αλλά μπορούμε το κάθε ΚΕΔΙΜΑ να κάνει μικρό κομμάτι από αυτά τα πολλά πράγματα που πρέπει να γίνουν στο πλαίσιο του δικτύου. Βέβαια, είναι μια γέφυρα για διεθνείς συνεργασίες. Μας έδωσε τη δυνατότητα να γνωρίσουμε άτομα πολύ αξιόλογα, όπως ο Μανώλης Ζωάου Κώστα και όλοι οι υπόλοιποι εμπειρογνώμονες που είχαμε στο πρόγραμμα. Και έτσι λοιπόν όλοι μαζί να γνωρίσουμε πολύ περισσότερα πράγματα. Μας βοηθά να διεξάγουμε συλλογικές έρευνες, όπως η μεγάλη έρευνα για την ανάπτυξη, για την ανάλυση αναγκών, και κοντολογείς, όπως ήταν και το μότο του συνεδρίου που διοργανώσαμε στην Αλεξανδρούπολη, Together we are smarter and stronger. Έτσι, άρα λοιπόν πρέπει να φτιάξουμε μια κοινότητα μάθησης και κοινότητα πρακτικής. Για να δούμε τι πετύχαμε όμως ως τώρα. Πρώτα φτιάξαμε τον κανονισμό του δικτύου, που ήταν πολύ βοηθητικός ειδικά και για τα νεότερα, ας πούμε, ΚΕΔΙΜΑ, γιατί πάτησαν σε αυτό για να φτιάξουν και τα δικά τους. Φτιάξαμε το ερωτηματολόγιο ανοίγματος αναγκών και διεξήγαμε έρευνα σχετική, ποιοτική και ποσοτική, και μέσω συνεντεύξεων και μέσω του ερωτηματολογίου. Ετοιμάσαμε την εργαλειοθήκη του Πανεπιστημιακού, θα σας μιλήσω αμέσως παρακάτω γι' αυτό. Κάναμε συναντήσεις με εμπειρογνώμονες. Ουσιαστικά γίνανε 7 συναντήσεις του δικτύου που κρατήσαμε πρακτικά, όλα είναι διαθέσιμα στην ιστοσελίδα του δικτύου. Ετοιμάσαμε το μητρό των εκπαιδευτών, άρα όποιος θέλει από τα ΚΕΔΙΜΑ, τώρα από τα ΚΕΔΙΜΑ μπορεί να πηγαίνει στο μητρό και να κάνει ό,τι θεωρεί ότι ταιριάζει με το προφίλ αυτό που θέλει να κάνει. Ετοιμάσαμε και διοργανώσαμε και υλοποιήσαμε το Διεθνές Συνέδριο 6 και 7 Ιουλίου του 2023 στην Αλεξανδρούπολη, από όπου βγήκε ο τόμος πρακτικών και ο τόμος περιλήψεων. Και τέλος, ετοιμάζουμε και θα κυκλοφορήσει τώρα, πριν τη λήξη του έργου, ένας συλλογικός τόμος με τίτλο Teaching Transformation in Higher Education, Success Stories from LPCs, from Learning and Teaching Centers. Τώρα, να πούμε δύο λόγια για την έρευνα που διεξήγαμε. Η έρευνα ανάλυσης αναγκών, στην έρευνα ανάλυσης αναγκών συμμετείχαν 1.295 μέλη του διδακτικού προσωπικού των ελληνικών ΑΕΗ όλων των κατηγοριών, και τα αποτελέσματα έδειξαν ότι από τα μέλη από το 29, μάλλον από το διδακτικό προσωπικό, το 29%, δηλαδή περίπου 1 στους 3 ήταν ανέτοιμοι την πρώτη φορά που βγήκαν στην τάξη να διδάξουν. Το 19% από αυτούς είχαν αγωνία στο πρώτο μάθημα, και αν συνδυάσουμε αυτούς τους δύο αριθμούς, φαίνεται ότι πολλές φορές μπαίνουμε στην τάξη να διδάξουμε χωρίς να είμαστε προετοιμασμένοι. Χρειαζόμαστε την ανάγκη να μάθουμε πώς να εφαρμόσουμε όλες τις καινοτόμες μεθόδους διδασκαλίας. Τώρα, το πολύ ενθαρρυντικό είναι ότι το 65% του δείγματος δήλωσε ότι ήταν πρόθυμο για αλλαγή των διδακτικών και πρακτικών. Αυτό είναι κάτι που δεν το βρίσκουμε πολύ συχνά στις έρευνες, και ήταν ένας αριθμός που μας χαροποίησε πάρα πολύ. Οι συμμετέχοντες θεωρούν ως προκλήσεις το έργο τους τη συμπεριφορά των φοιτητών και τις ελλειπείς προϋπάρχουσες γνώσεις των φοιτητών που έρχονται σχετικά προετοίμαστοι σε σχέση με ό,τι γίνεται στο παρελθόν. Και τέλος, ως προς τα θέματα για τη μόρφωση, θέλουν να δουν πώς μπορούν να κινητροδοτούν τους φοιτητές και τι κάνουν όταν στην τάξη έχουν άτομα με μαθησιακές δυσκολίες. Αυτός είναι ένας αριθμός που λένε και περισσότερο μεγαλώνει, και άρα πρέπει να γνωρίζουν πώς μπορούν να βοηθήσουν καλύτερα αυτή την ομάδα φοιτητών. Τώρα, η εργαλειοθήκη του Πανεπιστημιακού ήταν ένα πόνημα με 9 κεφάλαια. Κάθε κεφάλαιο ξεκινά με μια μικρή εισαγωγή, εξηγεί ποιο είναι το θέμα του κεφαλαίου, αυτό κάτω από τον τίτλο «Κατανοώντας τι είναι». Παρέχει τη βασική γνώση κάτω από τον τίτλο «Τι πρέπει να γνωρίσουμε». Δίνει πρακτικές που πρέπει να υιοθετούμε εντός τάξης, τι πρέπει να κάνουμε. Αιτιολογεί τη σημασία του θέματος του κεφαλαίου, γιατί αυτό είναι σημαντικό. Και επίσης οδηγεί σε αναστοχασμό των διδακτικών πρακτικών του αναγνώστη και του διδάσκοντα με το αναστοχάσιο τις διδακτικές σου πρακτικές. Και τέλος, παρέχει χρήσιμους πόρους και υλικό με τη μορφή συνδέσμων. Είναι πραγματικά ένα πολύ βοηθητικό εργαλείο, που είναι και ένα πρώτο βήμα για να το δώσουμε στο διδακτικό προσωπικό του Πανεπιστημίου μας και να δουλέψουμε μέσω των ΚΕΔΙΜΑ πάνω σε αυτό, με βάση αυτό, κάνοντας διάφορα workshop ώστε να εξοικειώσουμε το διδακτικό προσωπικό του Πανεπιστημίου μας με ό,τι αναγράφεται στην εργαλειοθήκη. Τι αυτό κάναμε, είπαμε, το Διεθνές Συνέδριο, που είχαμε 52 διαζώσεις συμμετέχοντες, 100 συνολικά ομιλητές, 8 εξ αποστάσεως συμμετέχοντες, συμμετείχαν 32 πανεπιστήμια, 10 από το εξωτερικό και 22 από το εσωτερικό. Χαιρέτησε ο πρόεδρος της ΕΤΑΕΚ, ήταν πολύ μεγάλη τιμή για μας. Ήταν εκεί ο πρώην Γενικός Γραμματέας Ανώτατης Εκπαίδευσης, τον οποίο οφροφίλουμε και την ίδρυση των ΚΕΔΙΜΑ αλλά και την χρηματοδότησή τους, ο Αποστόλης Δημητρόπουλος, τον οποίο και βραβεύσαμε. Ήταν 7 invited speakers, παρουσιάστηκαν 47 εργασίες. Και αυτό που προέκυψε από το συνέδριο, και ήταν και η πρόταση της Terry Maguire, είναι ότι together we are smarter and stronger. Βγήκαν τα πρακτικά του συνεδρίου που περιλαμβάνουν 38 κείμενα από αυτά που παρουσιάστηκαν στο συνέδριο και βέβαια να πούμε ότι τα πρακτικά είναι διαθέσιμα στην ιστοσελίδα του κέντρου που έχει και πάρα πολλούς άλλους πόρους. Γι' αυτό είναι πολύ καλό να μπείτε, να την επισκεφτείτε και να δείτε τι μπορείτε να κατεβάσετε από αυτή. Και το τελευταίο μας πόνημα που θα κυκλοφορήσει τώρα αυτή τη βδομάδα είναι η επιμέλεια ενός τόμου με τίτλο Teaching the Transformation in Higher Education, Success Stories from Learning and Teaching Centers. Τι είναι αυτό? Περιλαμβάνει 5 case studies, μία εκτενή εισαγωγή και πολλά recommendation, πολλές συστάσεις προς τα κέντρα υποστήριξης διδασκαλίας και μάθησης. Το πρώτο κείμενο είναι το Integrating the Student Voice που μας έδωσε ο Λουκ Μίλλαρ. Το δεύτερο είναι The Key Ingredients for Teaching and Learning Center Success που μας έδωσε ο Μανουέλ Τζουάο Κώστα. Key Elements for Digital Implementation από τη Λίντα Καστανιέτα και το Distributed Leadership in Teaching and Learning από τη Maurice Birmingham και τον Πίο Πέντον. Και τέλος, The Power of Collaboration από την Terry Markwell και την Eileen Ματεβόη. Όλοι αυτοί ήταν οι εξωτερικοί εμπειρογνώμενες του έργου. Στο τελείωμα λοιπόν αυτού του πολύ ωραίου ταξιδιού, μάλλον όχι το οριστικό τέλος, αλλά το μεταβατικό τελείωμα, θα λέγαμε ότι το μεγάλο στοίχημα είναι να αποτελέσουν τα ΚΕΔΙΜΑ κόμβους καινοτομίας και σημαντικό πυλώνα για τη διασφάλιση ποιότητας στη διδασκαλία και τη μάθηση. Αλλά να πούμε ότι αυτό που πετύχαμε είναι να γίνουμε μια θεσμοθετημένη. Χρειάζεται μια ανησυχία και ένα πάθος για τη διδασκαλία και τη μάθηση και μαθαίνουμε πώς να το κάνουμε καλύτερα διεπιδρώντας τακτικά. Άρα λοιπόν με αυτό κλείνω την σημερινή μου παρουσίαση. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ που μου δώσατε τη δυνατότητα να είμαι έστω και διαδικτυακά μαζί σας. Σας ευχαριστώ.
Ωραία, είδαμε λίγο τι κάνουν έτσι τα κέντρα υποστήριξης διδασκαλίας και μάθησης. Το δικό μας έχει αρχίσει τη λειτουργία του από πέρυσι. Πραγματικά έχουμε κάνει αρκετή δουλειά και εμείς από πέρυσι. Εγώ έτσι θα ήθελα να δώσω το λόγο τώρα στο Σπύρο το Δουκάκη και στη συνέχεια θα παρουσιάσω και εγώ κάποια πράγματα για το δικό μας κέντρο.
Ωραία. Ευχαριστώ κυρία Καμπάς, αγαπητή Κατερίνα. Εντάξει, μεγάλη χαρά γιατί είχα εμπλοκή σε όλο αυτό το εγχείρημα και μάλιστα χαρά γιατί είχα και το λόγο του γνωστικού αντικειμένου που είναι το πώς αξιοποιούμε τις ψηφιακές τεχνολογίες στην εκπαιδευτική διαδικασία, φέρνοντας βέβαια και ένα βάρος, ας το πω έτσι, καλό όμως βάρος, έτσι το κουβαλάω και μου αρέσει το κουβαλάω αυτό, το τι κάνουμε στην πρωτοβάθμια και δευτεροβάθμια εκπαίδευση, το τι κάναμε όλα αυτά τα χρόνια στα σχολεία και πώς προετοιμάζουμε τους μαθητές για να μεταβούν στην τριτοβάθμια εκπαίδευση και να δούμε από πού έρχονται και πού μπορούμε να τους φτάσουμε στα πανεπιστήμια. Είναι εξαιρετικά μεγάλη χαρά μου που βρίσκομαι σε αυτή την τελευταία, ας το πούμε, την τελευταία αυτού του κύκλου, ελπίζουμε όλη η συνάντηση. Και έτσι να πω, αν μου επιτρέπετε, Κατερίνα, και 2 λόγια για το Ινστιτούτο Εκπαιδευτικής Πολιτικής, γιατί δεν είναι σε όλους γνωστό. Αποτελεί τον επιτελικό, επιστημονικό και ερευνητικό φορέα που υποστηρίζει το Υπουργείο Παιδείας, Θρησκευμάτων και Αθλητισμού και τους υποπτευόμενους φορείς του σε θέματα που αφορούν την πρωτοβάθμια και τη δευτεροβάθμια εκπαίδευση, σε θέματα που αφορούν την επιμόρφωση των εκπαιδευτικών, τη μετάβαση, το κομμάτι της μετάβασης από τη δευτεροβάθμια εκπαίδευση στην τριτοβάθμια εκπαίδευση, τη μεταλλικιακή εκπαίδευση. Ασχολούμαστε ακόμα με το θέμα των εκπαιδευτικών ανισοτήτων και ένα επίσης ενδιαφέρον ζήτημα που πάνω στο οποίο εργάζεται το ΙΕΠ, είναι το Ινστιτούτο Εκπαιδευτικής Πολιτικής, είναι το θέμα της μαθητικής διαρροής και της πρόορης εγκατάλειψης σχολείου. Με απότερο στόχο, όπως φαντάζεστε όλοι, είναι να διασφαλίσουμε το δικαίωμα όλων των παιδιών στην εκπαίδευση. Για το λόγο αυτό και εκ του ρόλου αυτού γνωμοδοτεί ή εισηγείται κατόπιν σχετικού ερωτήματος του Υπουργού Παιδείας, Θρησκευμάτων και Αθλητισμού, ώστε να μπορούν να οριοθετηθούν οι πολιτικές, οι εκπαιδευτικές πολιτικές πίσω από τα ανάλογα ζητήματα. Και αυτό που έτσι μέσα από αυτό το φορέα και μέσα και από όλη τη συζήτηση που έχουμε κάνει το τελευταίο διάστημα για τα ΚΕΔΙΜΑ, είναι αυτό το κρίσιμο κομμάτι της σημασίας της πολιτικής πίσω από την εκπαιδευτική διαδικασία. Φανταζόμαστε όλοι, δουλεύοντας σε όποια δομή και βαθμίδα εκπαίδευσης, ότι η εκπαίδευση που παρέχουμε, η διδασκαλία που κάνουμε, ο τρόπος που ενισχύουμε τους μαθητές μας, τους φοιτητές μας, είναι πρακτικά, ουσιαστικά μάλλον, ο πυρήνας και της κοινωνικής ανάπτυξης και της προόδου μιας χώρας, ενός λαού, ενός έθνους. Πραγματικά, όπως θα έλεγε κάποιος, ότι μπορεί και να συνεισφέρει και να καθορίζει, θα λέγει κάποιος πιο ψηλά, το μέλλον μιας χώρας και των νέων γενιών, ουσιαστικά. Μέσα από το ΚΕΔΙΜΑ, πραγματικά ένιωσα από την αρχή που ξεκίνησε ότι μας δόθηκε ένα τέτοιο βήμα. Δηλαδή να συζητήσουμε για την ποιότητα της διδασκαλίας, για την αποτελεσματικότητα της μάθησης σε όλα τα επίπεδα. Ξέρετε, είναι αυτό μεταξύ του διδάσκω και κάνω έρευνα. Και είδαμε λίγο το πρώτο κομμάτι του διδάσκω και τα αποτελέσματα της διδασκαλίας μου έχουν αντίκτυπο στον εκπαιδευόμενο, στον φοιτητή, στη φοιτήτρια, όπου μετά δημιουργούμε αυτούς τους ανθρώπους που έρχονται είτε στους χώρους εργασίας, είτε συνεχίζουν ερευνητικά, ακολουθώς μεταπτυχιακές και διδακτορικές σπουδές συνέχεια. Οι δράσεις που έγιναν όλο αυτό το διάστημα και οι ευκαιρίες που μας δόθηκαν να υποθούν πράγματα, να κάνουμε συζητήσεις, να δούμε και τι κάνουν τα άλλα κέντρα διδασκαλίας και μάθησης στη χώρα μας, και βλέποντας και καλές πρακτικές που πραγματοποιούνται από χώρες στο εξωτερικό. Για παράδειγμα, η ομιλία της κυρίας Σαμαράς ήταν ακριβώς ένα τέτοιο πλαίσιο εικόνας. Δείχνει ότι η αναγκαιότητα τόσο μετασχηματισμού του τρόπου που εργαζόμαστε με τους φοιτητές μας και οι νέες προσεγγίσεις και μέθοδοι διδασκαλίας, ας το πούμε έτσι, απαιτούνται, χρειάζονται τόσο για να ενισχυθεί η συνεργασία, όσο και ουσιαστικά να έχουμε κρίσιμο ρόλο στο πώς εξελίσσονται στο μέλλον οι άνθρωποι, οι φοιτητές μας. Θέλω να ευχαριστήσω θερμά την κυρία Καμπά, την Κατερίνα, έτσι που είχα την ευκαιρία να συνεργαστώ σε αυτό το εγχείρημα μαζί της. Ήταν με όλους τους τρόπους εξαιρετικής ό,τι κάναμε, και ελπίζω να συνεχιστεί το έργο. Κάτι ακούω τέλος πάντων για αυτό το θέμα, οπότε Κατερίνα, και πάλι θερμάς ευχαριστίες και από τον Πρίτανη και σε σένα για την συμμετοχή μου σε αυτό το εγχείρημα.
Ωραία, ευχαριστούμε Σπύρο. Η αλήθεια είναι ότι η ανάγκη για τα ΚΕΔΙΜΑ νομίζω ότι φαίνεται από την έρευνα που μας παρουσίασε η κυρία Ζωή Γαβριλίδου, όπου από ό,τι μας είπε ο ένας στους τρεις δηλώνουν ανέτοιμοι για να κάνουν τα μαθήματα και 65% των καθηγητών δήλωσαν έτσι μία προθυμία για αλλαγή διδακτικών πρακτικών, που λίγο συνδέεται και με την σημερινή παρουσίαση έτσι, της κυρίας Σαμαρά. Θα πω ότι εμείς κάναμε μια σειρά δράσεων, θέματα που ζήτησαν οι καθηγητές για επιμόρφωση είναι η κινητροδότηση, δηλαδή πώς δίνουμε κίνητρα στους φοιτητές, και οι μαθησιακές δυσκολίες. Εμείς η σειρά δράσεων που έχουμε κάνει από πέρυσι, θα μοιραστώ και μία διαφάνεια μαζί σας που έχω, έτσι, μια παρουσίαση που έχω ετοιμάσει. Okay. Η πρώτη λοιπόν διαδικτυακή ημερίδα είχε να κάνει με ακριβώς αυτό το θέμα της διαφορετικότητας και της συμπερίληψης στην εκπαιδευτική διαδικασία της τριτοβάθμιας εκπαίδευσης. Ξεκινήσαμε ουσιαστικά τη λειτουργία από πέρυσι το Μάιο. Βλέπουμε λοιπόν έτσι πώς γρήγορα μπήκαμε και αυξήσαμε τις δράσεις μας μέχρι σήμερα. Και ελπίζουμε ότι θα συνεχίσουν αυτές οι δράσεις. Όλες μας οι δράσεις είναι μαγνητοσκοπημένες και ανεβασμένες στην ιστοσελίδα του ΚΕΔΙΜΑ. Μαζί είναι και όλο το υλικό που έχουν δώσει οι εκπαιδευτές μας. Στην πρώτη ημερίδα μίλησε ο κύριος Αγγελάκος, καθηγητής από το Τμήμα Ιστορίας του Ιονίου Πανεπιστημίου, και μίλησε για τις παιδαγωγικές και διδακτικές ορίζουσες μιας σύγχρονης ακαδημαϊκής διδασκαλίας. Η κυρία Ζωή Διονυσίου, αναπληρώτρια καθηγήτρια στο Τμήμα Μουσικών Σπουδών, όπου μίλησε για την φοιτητοκεντρική προσέγγιση και πώς την ενισχύουμε στην τριτοβάθμια εκπαίδευση, στόχους και περιεχόμενα μαθημάτων, διδασκαλία, μάθηση, αξιολόγηση. Η κυρία Αγνή Παπαδοπούλου, επίκουρη τότε, αναπληρώτρια τώρα, στο Τμήμα Τεχνών Ήχου και Εικόνας του Ιονίου Πανεπιστημίου, κουλτούρα συμπερίληψη στην πανεπιστημιακή εκπαίδευση, συμπαραγωγή γνώσης, διαμόρφωση διαδικασίας και προοπτικών. Η κυρία Μίτσι Ακογιόνογλου, επίκουρος καθηγήτρια, που μίλησε για τη συμπερίληψη στην τριτοβάθμια εκπαίδευση, και ο κύριος Δουκάκης για την εκπαιδευτική νευροεπιστήμη και ενίσχυση της συμπερίληψης στην τριτοβάθμια εκπαίδευση. Οι καθηγητές που επιλέγησαν ήταν από διαφορετικά τμήματα του Ιονίου και ήταν οι καθηγητές που πραγματικά ασχολούνται με την εκπαιδευτική έρευνα σε διαφορετικά αντικείμενα. Στη συνέχεια έγινε το σεμινάριο για τις κρυμμένες προκλήσεις της εξαποστάσεως εκπαίδευσης, πώς γίνεται υποστήριξη των φοιτητών, ψηφιακές τεχνολογίες και κοινότητες μάθησης. Έγινε τον 6ο μήνα. Εκεί μας μίλησε η Γκέλη Μανούσου, επίκουρος καθηγήτρια από το ΕΑΠ, για την υποστήριξη των φοιτητών σε εξαποστάσεως προγράμματα σπουδών. Η Άννα Αποστολίδου από το Τμήμα Ιστορίας, Ιονίου Πανεπιστήμιο, για τις ψηφιακές τεχνολογίες και ενιολογήσεις της μάθησης, μια ανθρωπολογική ματιά στην εξαποστάσεως εκπαίδευση. Και η Μαρία Νιάρη, που είναι καθηγήτρια σύμβουλος στο ΕΑΠ, για πώς καλλιεργούμε τις κοινότητες μάθησης εξαποστάσεως. Μετά έγινε για την ηθική της τεχνολογίας στην τεχνολογία της πληροφορίας, το δεύτερο διαδικτυακό σεμινάριο με το νέο ακαδημαϊκό έτος, όπου μας μίλησε ο κύριος Έξαρχος για το νέο μεταπτυχιακό που φτιάχνουν ηθικοί στην τεχνολογία της πληροφορίας. Η κυρία Έγλη Δάφνη είναι δικηγόρος παραρείο Πάγο και μίλησε για το ρόλο της βιοηθικής στην έρευνα, προκλήσεις και ηθικά ζητήματα. Ο κύριος Γιάννης Σταματέλος, πρόεδρος του Ινστιτούτου Φιλοσοφίας και Τεχνολογίας, για τις σοκρατικές μεθοδολογίες και την ηθική ενδυνάμωση μέσω τεχνητής νοημοσύνης. Ο κύριος Άρης Βραχάτης, που είναι επίκουρος καθηγητής στο Τμήμα Πληροφορικής, για τα ηθικά ζητήματα της τεχνητής νοημοσύνης. Και η Αγνή Παπαδοπούλου, που σας είπα και πριν, από το Τμήμα Τεχνών Ήχου και Εικόνας, για τις περιπέτειες ηθικού στοχασμού, διαδικασία και έλεγχος. Μετά η τέταρτη δράση μας ήταν μια ημερίδα για την αξιολόγηση. Διδακτική και αξιολόγηση, ευθυγραμμίζοντας την αξιολόγηση με παιδαγωγικές αντιλήψεις και αξίες. Πάλι μίλησε η κυρία Παπαδοπούλου για το πώς μπορεί η αξιολόγηση να χρησιμοποιηθεί ως εργαλείο μάθησης. Ο κύριος Φωτίδης, επίκουρος καθηγητής στο Τμήμα Περιβάλλοντος, για τη μάθηση βάση έργου, αξιολόγηση και ομότιμη αξιολόγηση, αναπτύσσοντας την κριτική σκέψη και τις ικανότητες ανάγνωσης, συγγραφής και συνεργασίας. Ο κύριος Φωτίδης επιλέγει γιατί βάζει πολλές εργασίες στα μαθήματά του. Ο κύριος Αμπελιώτης, ο οποίος μας μίλησε για την εξαποστάσεως εκπαίδευση και τα εργαλεία δημιουργίας εκπαιδευτικού υλικού και ανάλυση δεδομένων αξιολόγησης. Και η Αθηνά Φυτίκα, αναπληρώτρια καθηγήτρια από το Τμήμα Μουσικών Σπουδών, για την τέχνη της αξιολόγησης στην τέχνη της μουσικής εκτέλεσης. Στη συνέχεια έγινε ένα εργαστήριο για την αξιοποίηση της πλατφόρμας Moodle, πώς θα μπορούσε να χρησιμοποιηθεί για την ενίσχυση της εξαποστάσεως διδασκαλίας. Εκεί προσπαθήσαμε να δείξουμε πώς μπορεί κάποιος να δημιουργήσει και να διαχειριστεί μαθήματα στην πλατφόρμα Moodle, πώς να προσθέσει περιεχόμενο έγγραφα από όλη μέσα, πώς να αξιοποιηθούν τα εργαλεία και οι δραστηριότητες, πώς να παρακολουθούν οι καθηγητές την πρόοδο των μαθητών και να αξιολογούν την απόδοσή τους και πώς να δημιουργούν περιβάλλοντα που ενθαρρύνουν τη συνεργασία και εν τέλει την αυτομάθηση. Αυτό το έκανε ο κύριος Δρίβας Θανάσης, μηχανικός πληροφορικής από το Εθνικό Αστεροσκοπείο Αθηνών, καθηγητής πληροφορικής στο Αμερικανικό Κολέγιο της Ελλάδας και εξωτερικός συνεργάτης στο ΚΕΔΙΜΑ, και η κυρία Νίαρη Μαρία, που είναι καθηγήτρια σύμβουλος στο ΕΑΠ και εξωτερικός συνεργάτης εδώ. Μετά έγινε ένα εργαστήριο για το Publish στο αιώνα. Έχω ένα καινοτόμο σύστημα διαχείρισης πανεπιστημιακών ιστοχώρων που χρησιμοποιεί το Ιόνιο, όπου έγινε μια επίδειξη στο κοινό, στους εκπαιδευτικούς. Από εδώ και πέρα και οι εκπαιδευτικοί έτσι λίγο θα μπορούν να έχουν πρόσβαση στην ιστοσελίδα τους. Πώς έτσι παρουσιάστηκε η καινοτομία του συστήματος και η λειτουργικότητά του. Οι παρουσιάσεις γίνανε από τον κύριο Γιαννακουλόπουλο, καθηγητή του Τμήματος Τεχνών Ήχου και Εικόνας και Πρόεδρου του, που είναι και υπεύθυνος της ιστοσελίδας, αυτός τη σχεδίασε, αυτός συντονίζει όλη τη διαδικασία. Ο κύριος Μινάς Περγαντής, μεταδιδάκτορας του Τμήματος Τεχνών Ήχου και Εικόνας, ο οποίος δουλεύει σε αυτό. Ο κύριος Άρης Λαμπρογέο Όργος, υποψήφιος διδάκτορας, και η κυρία Ρουμπίνη Οικονομίδου, επιστημονική συνεργάτηδα του τμήματος. Μετά περάσαμε στο τρίτο εργαστήριο, που ήταν για το ChatGPT, ένα εργαλείο για την τεχνητή νοημοσύνη, ένα εργαλείο τεχνητής νοημοσύνης για την ακαδημαϊκή κοινότητα. Έχω να σας πω ότι μπορεί όλοι να θέλουν να αλλάξουν, να λέμε ότι το 65% θέλει να ενισχύσει τις θεωρίες διδασκαλίας που χρησιμοποιεί. Εδώ έγινε πανικός σε αυτό το σεμινάριο. Συνδεθήκανε πάρα πολλοί καθηγητές από όλη την Ελλάδα, και έγινε έτσι μια παρουσίαση για το πώς μπορεί να χρησιμοποιηθεί το ChatGPT για εκπαιδευτικούς λόγους από τον κύριο Θανάση Δρίβα, που είπα και πριν, και ήταν πάρα πολύ επιτυχημένο, γιατί παρουσίασε τι είναι η τεχνητή νοημοσύνη, τι είναι το ChatGPT και ποιος ο ρόλος του στην εκπαίδευση. Πώς έδειξε σε καθηγητές πώς μπορούν να αλληλεπιδρούν, πώς μπορούν να βελτιστοποιήσουν τη διαδικασία ερωταπαντήσεων, και παρουσιάστηκαν και σενάρια εργασίας, καθώς και περιορισμοί και έτσι κάποιοι κανόνες δεοντολογίας στη χρήση του. Η πρώτη τελευταία δράση μέχρι σήμερα ήταν οι καινοτόμες μέθοδοι διδασκαλίας και εκπαιδευτικές πρακτικές, που πάλι επιλέγησαν καθηγητές από το Ιονίου Πανεπιστήμιο που ασχολούνται με την τέχνη και την διδασκαλία. Η κυρία Ρενάτα Δαλιανούδη, διδάσκοντας τα έδρανα της ΕΡΤ, μια καινοφανής εκπαιδευτική εμπειρία για τους φοιτητές του Ιονίου Πανεπιστημίου. Η κυρία Ζωή Διονυσίου, για το πώς μπορούμε να ενδυναμώσουμε την παιδαγωγική και καλλιτεχνική ταυτότητα των φοιτητών, το παράδειγμα της ομάδας μουσικοπαιδαγωγικών δράσεων του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών. Και η κυρία Αγνή Παπαδοπούλου, για το φιλοσοφικό, αισθητικό και οικολογικό πρίσμα, επαναπροσδιορισμός θεωρήσεων, κριτικά στοχαστικές διεργασίες. Και σήμερα είμαστε στην ένατη δράση, είναι το τρίτο σεμινάριο που έτσι υλοποιήθηκε με την κυρία Σαμαρά. Είναι χαρά μας που φτάσαμε ως εδώ. Εάν θέλει κάποιος να προσθέσει κάτι, να μας πει και κανένα θέμα που θα ήθελε να ασχοληθούμε στις επόμενες δράσεις μας, γιατί έπονται και άλλες δράσεις. Εγώ ήδη έχω επικοινωνήσει με καθηγήτριες που ασχολούνται και στην Αγγλία με παιδαγωγικά θέματα και νέες τεχνολογίες, γιατί θα γίνουν και άλλες δράσεις, ανεξάρτητα από την συνέχιση του προγράμματος ή όχι. Εάν θέλετε να μας προτείνετε κι εσείς κάποιες δράσεις, είμαστε στη διάθεσή σας και πραγματικά θα ήταν μεγάλη βοήθεια. Όλες οι δράσεις μας, καθώς και όλες οι πληροφορίες για το ΚΕΔΙΜΑ, είναι στην ιστοσελίδα του ΚΕΔΙΜΑ. Σας αφήνω γιατί έχει πιάσει και ο άντρας μου την κουβέντα στο μπαλκόνι και τον ακούω και λίγο με αποσυντονίζει. Αν δεν έχει κάποιος να προσθέσει κάτι, εδώ θα λήξω τη σημερινή συζήτηση. Θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω πολύ όλους τους συνεργάτες που ακούσατε, ήταν πάρα πολλοί όλοι αυτοί που συμμετείχαν σε όλες τις δράσεις μας. Είναι πολλοί και οι συνεργάτες έτσι και αλλιώς του ΚΕΔΙΜΑ. Ο κύριος Δουκάκης και ο κύριος Κουλουλιώτης και η κυρία Παπαδοπούλου, που βλέπω αυτή τη στιγμή και είναι και οι τρεις μέσα, είναι πολύτιμοι συνεργάτες του ΚΕΔΙΜΑ, γιατί έχουν ασχοληθεί πάρα πολύ με πολλές δράσεις. Ο κύριος Δουκάκης και η κυρία Παπαδοπούλου ο κύριος Δουκάκης έχει ασχοληθεί όχι μόνο στις παρουσιάσεις εδώ και στις ημερίδες, αλλά και σε άλλα πράγματα, και ο κύριος Κουλουλιώτης στην έρευνα, οπότε θα ήθελα να τους ευχαριστήσω όλους ιδιαιτέρως και εσάς που μας αντέξατε τόση ώρα, και καλό βράδυ.
Καλό βράδυ, ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ.
Ευχαριστούμε, καλό βράδυ.
Στέλη που μας λέει γι' αυτό. Θα το συμπεριλάβουμε. Σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ για το σχόλιο.
Καλό βράδυ.
Γεια σας.
Καλό βράδυ.